Captain America Brave New World, Apollo Justice Ace Attorney Trilogy, and Pacifica. This is staying in.
Right. Everyone, what's the weirdest subscription you've ever had?
Oh, I think now that we're in the world of modernity, a Love Film subscription, because I kind of feel like that's sort of preposterous in modern times, right? Like, right, okay, check it out, folks.
But
you're gonna give us £6 a month, okay? Yeah, and we're gonna send you through the post one of 10 films that you would like to watch, right? On a list of things. We're going to physically send them to you. And you don't really get much of a choice as to what it is that you get. And now that I think about it, now that
I know what you're going to say.
Right?
So it's amazing.
Yeah. Now, actually, do you know what? In 2025, I feel like actually somebody taking that
all
out
choice
of my
away
hands.
and just sending you something to watch.
Also, that the Love Film package where you could turn it inside out and create the envelope to post it back in.
Yeah, it's so good.
The envelope. Yeah. Actually, now that I say it, I think it's weird that I think maybe Netflix is the weirdest subscription that I have, because I just want Love Film again, please.
Yeah, it does kind of remove that whole element of kind of the excessive choice that you have.
Yeah.
And you end up spending all your time searching through the choices without being able to pick anything. Having it pre-selected for you and sent to you, and you don't have any of the options. That sounds amazing.
I do remember when I had Love Film that I did spend ages curating that top 10.
Yeah.
Being what could I be in the mood for at any given moment, and choosing it really precisely.
Yeah.
And then as soon as that letter lands on your doorstep, first of all, great to get letters, big fan of it. I'm up for any subscription. Obviously, I think one of my longest standing subscription at the moment is to Senate magazine. So I love the fact that drops on my doorstep every once in a while, and love getting post. But when Love Film dropped through the door, right, the clock is ticking. Right, we've got to get this. We've got to get this watched. What's it going to be? Oh, it's the brilliant classic early thousands film Equilibrium. We've got
wow.
We've got to.
Yeah, he basically spent hours kind of planning it all, and then went, I want something that looks like The Matrix. Ah, there we go, done.
Yeah, but I specifically don't want The Matrix. Wow. Yeah, I think for me that's. Yeah, I mean, I can't really think of many very odd subscriptions. I had a Japanese candy box subscription at one point. That was quite fun, and you get some weird stuff out of that, but it wasn't for very long.
See, I think I don't really get on with subscription stuff. I've never really done many subscriptions. Like the one I did most recently was kind of like a tea subscription. But even in that case, I knew I wanted a specific tea that I would have regularly. I would want a peppermint tea or an Earl Grey, and that's all I wanted. I didn't want you to give me variation. I know what I want. Please supply me with that. All you're doing is just saving me a job of going and buying it. That's what I look at a subscription for.
Is that the email you wrote to the company to set up the subscription?
Yeah.
I was a member of the Batman fan club.
Excellent.
The Beano fan club in particular.
I remember as a child getting a I don't think it's a subscription. I think it was just one that my dad used to buy for me each week or each month it came out, of a dinosaur magazine that used to come with glow in the dark skeleton that you would build up, and every week was a tiny bone.
Yeah.
And it would take you 200 issues to make this dinosaur.
Yeah, I had a magazine very similar to that, the dinosaur one, where it was a bit of a con. First issue was 99p. And every subsequent issue was something like, I don't know, $1.99 or $2.99 or something.
Oh yeah, they hook you in.
And that is still a thing. So the other day, I ended up with an accidental subscription to PVA glue.
Okay. How? Either way. How?
There are conversations that have to happen at some point along that journey that would have said you are signing up to a PVA glue subscription.
Yeah, just to be clear, you are subscribing to You are on pvasubscription.com.
I was as blown away as you all. It was a thing that was possible.
What did you think was going to arrive?
So the other day through the post, I received my folded space insert for Clank Catacombs.
Nice.
But I've run out of glue.
Right.
And Hugo's got no PVA glue. Usually I rely on him, being the toddler in the room, to provide something to source his own glue. Usually toddlers and preschoolers have got some PVA glue knocking around.
Access to it.
He's got none of it. So I have to go and source some PVA glue, right?
Right.
So I go onto Amazon, right? And if you shop on Amazon, Top Hack...
I know what's happened here.
Top Hack...
He spied what he calls a grift.
Top Hack, subscribe and save, right? Subscribe and save to everything. Because as soon as it arrives, you just cancel it, and then you're getting the money off, and you're not ending up with loads and loads of subscriptions. So I saw PVA glue, subscribe and save, 10% off, 15% off your next orders. Brilliant. Click. Glue arrives. Brilliant. Right. Must remember to cancel that subscribe and save.
Yeah.
Start building my inserts.
Yeah.
Brilliant. Glue goes into drawer. Sam forgets about glue.
Right. Okay.
To be fair to Amazon, they did send me an email saying, just to let you know, you're
you're the first person to click yes on this. Just want to make sure you're aware.
Your next,
Barry, we got one.
Your next bottle of PVA glue will be arriving tomorrow. If you don't want it, do you want to pause your subscription? And that was at that point I went, oh, crumbs. And then went online. I realised I'd also set up a subscription to rechargeable batteries as well.
Oh.
So
little does Sam know, he's spending thousands every month
on rechargeable batteries and PVA glue.
Well, yeah. All right.
Okay, Sam Turner, money-saving expert.
Yeah. I don't think Martin Lewis has got anything to worry about. I've almost had a subscription to basically the Ace Attorney games over the last 4 years, in so much as I don't know if you folks have been following this, but I think we've talked about it before on the podcast, whereby Capcom has actually started, well, it's actually just finished now, but they started essentially re-releasing all of the Ace Attorney games for modern platforms. So they started when the PS4 was out, and I think they still do the PS4 versions, so PS4 and Switch and all that sort of stuff. And it was this big initiative, essentially, to get all of the Ace Attorney games that they possibly could onto modern platforms. And I've been buying them all, because I've been buying them physically, because I'm like, I want to keep these, because I love this series. And I've been importing them from the US, so you can buy them all digitally, globally, but you can actually get the physical versions from the United States. But I've been chaining all of them. I've been chaining all of these games like almost back to back, these Ace Attorney games, and they're all very similar. They're all, if you've not played them before, they're like visual novels. So each of these, if you go onto our favourite website, or something, my favourite website, howlongtobeat.com, and then type in each of these games, the collections run about 90 to 100 hours each, because there's 3 games in there, and they are all about 40 hours.
Wow.
There's a lot of value. It's also a bit grueling if you're playing them all back to back, as I've found.
My instinct is, wow, that's a long time.
That is a long time.
And other than being Peter Willington, is there a reason why you chose to play them back to back?
Because that's why they released them, because of you.
I'm afraid, Kris, that it is just me being me. I'm like, well, I want to make sure that I can say that I've done all of these. So yeah, Apollo Justice starts to bring in more characters. So there is a really fun core group that's in Phoenix Wright, and then in Apollo Justice there's a few more, and each of them come with a few more mechanics. So they tend to revolve around forensics, because now you're on the 3DS and there's more like 3D stuff that you can do. That original Phoenix Wright trilogy was actually originally on the GBA, so even on the DS when they ported them, they had to be quite meager in the gameplay that they did. Whereas with the new power of like the 3DS, they were able to add a bit more gameplay into them, so you can spin objects around, you can add dust for fingerprints, you can do all that sort of stuff. But the predominant thing is go through and search around an area in first person, but with fixed camera angles all the time. So kind of like the original Myst or something along those lines, whereby you can't move in first person. You're just kind of like, here is the scene. The scene plays out.
How does all that work? So I'm assuming, you're not playing all these on a 3DS?
Heck no. I've been playing these on the Switch, which I think is the perfect place for it because it's portable.
Yeah. So how does it sort of recreate the classic sort of clamshell-esque sort of gameplay that was present on the 3DS? So, I think I played one of the Ace Attorney games on a 3DS game. I remember I have a very distinct memory of when I was working as a reporter in Scotland of covering a sheep trial, and during the
hang on, sorry,
I know what Kris is going to say. We need to be very clear. So what a sheep trial is,
and what was the act? Were they proved innocent? Or?
It was a sheepdog trial.
Sorry, I heard just sheep trial.
No, Kris, I went there as well. I was imagining
I'm so
sheep
sorry.
on the dock.
I just had a very, very somber court scene, and
no, I did say sheep trial, but it was a sheepdog trial. But I was playing during a break in play because it was raining. I remember playing on my 3DS an Ace Attorney game and thinking, boy, this has gone on for a long time. Anyway, back to you.
It removes the second screen, but there's not a whole heck of a lot of stuff going on the second screen. And where there is any direct interaction, like you might have done with the stylus, instead of doing anything with the stylus, they just replicated using traditional controls. There's no touch as well. There are touchscreen controls, and you can do some of that stuff, but you don't need to because it also just works on a big screen TV as well. And then it mostly just focuses everything down onto a single screen. Those Apollo Justice ones, they start to add in a few more mechanics. They do this thing whereby you have to... Apollo is able to see when someone is lying by seeing small ticks that they have. So, for example, if somebody is telling you a lie, it will go into this hyper-focus mode whereby you see them... So, for example, I'm holding my arm right now and I'm telling you a thing, right? So I'm telling you, two truths and a lie, right? And when I'm telling you the truth, right, I'm sort of like held here and my hand is holding my shoulder. I've got my arms crossed like this, and I'm telling you, that I'm telling you, truth number one, right? And then truth number two comes out, and I'm moving exactly the same way. I'm not really doing anything, right? And then lie number one, so fact three, lie one comes out. And I might start rubbing my shoulder, like gently, like very small micro movements.
Okay, so it's like LA Noire, basically, but less obvious when they're just like, LA Noire lets you live and breathe like a real detective. Detect when they're lying, and it would be like, oh, I had no idea which way the killer ran, and they would like wildly look.
Yeah.
Yeah,
and like the head and the body have different animators.
Yeah. It's like literally like towards the end of the Apollo Justice trilogy. It's like one of the last ones is like a flick of a finger, like it's a teeny tiny movement, and you have to spot that. There's also an emotion reader, which is whereby you're being told this sequence of events, and you have to see why basically. They're feeling different emotions and they're visually represented, and you have to connect why one is like where the discrepancy of emotion is. So for example, like, and then I found him murdered, and then like if it's like big green smiley face, it's like, wait, that's not good, that's not an emotion that you should be feeling at this point. And then in the very final one, which is the third of the Apollo Justice things on that cartridge that I've been playing, which is called Spirit of Justice. It's very, very high end, and they are now doing things like playing out big animations, big 3D animations, and you are stopping the footage at a certain time and like highlighting the thing that is incorrect. So that's really good. But it is a lot of reading, pressing the button to move on to the next set of reading, and then also doing the court case stuff of trying to catch people out, like basically trying to understand the logic of what somebody's reasoning is, and then trying to catch them out and catch them in the lie that they are essentially spinning, right? So I finished those games. I now have one cartridge
Oh my gosh.
left, and it is Miles Edgeworth Investigates. That is the last of the Ace Attorney games, and then I am done. And I have done every Ace Attorney game, every single one. But I got to say, boy howdy, it is great to have all of these games available again, and it is incredible to see Capcom doing something. And I think this is the key thing for me. Like, yeah, there is the insane challenge of, like, by the end of all of this, I will have played 500, 600 hours of Ace Attorney across that entire series. But the other really cool thing, the actual cool thing about it is I'm genuinely impressed that we are in a period of time whereby I can now play. These games were really hard to get hold of for a really long time. Like, you couldn't get them for love nor money because they just didn't think they were going to sell very well in the West when they were originally released. Now I can really easily get hold of all of them. And, like, it's lovely to see a company go, hey, we've got this beloved franchise. Should we treat it with care and respect? Yeah, all right. It's, like, genuinely really quite refreshing.
It is always nice to see that kind of the games that we would have played years ago that hold that kind of place in our hearts. I mean, I had it with Shenmue. When it was like on the defunct Dreamcast and was kind of lost to time. Mm-hmm. And then they brought kind of the original Shenmue and Shenmue 2 onto, I say modern day consoles, that would have been like the 360 and stuff like that. So they've been able to then progress, and obviously there was Shenmue 3 and stuff like that. But it is that lovely thing, as you kind of said, I've got that physical thing now that I can keep, and I have now. Whereas years ago, you didn't have that. It was kind of, you had it in that moment, but there was no longevity to that. You didn't have that element of passing it down the line. And now we do have that. And obviously, so much of that is driven by money. Oh, people bought that. They'll buy the remastered version again and want to play it again. And yes, we all see that. But it is actually still quite nice if you look past that commercialization of it, to say, you know what, I can still enjoy these great titles that in theory are long gone, that they are still there, because as you've got here with the Ace Attorney stuff, that the core mechanics of it don't change. They're still solid as a rock. And it's just what we now think of games in terms of the high production values, the kind of the 3D, the AAA, all that stuff. We think that them as the big games. Actually, sometimes it's just the mechanic, as we've got here, that is just solid and will just last the kind of the test of time. Don't get me wrong, I go back to Shenmue, it's not going to last because it wasn't built on solid mechanics that are going to survive a nuclear blast. It's not. Whereas something like this, it's simple, it's to the point, and it works.
And again, like, it's that thing of, like, incredible to see a company have this amount of respect, but also to not nickel and dime everybody. Like, genuinely, like, I thought when they announced these things, I thought, okay, well, they're going to release all of these individually, and you have to buy them all physically individually, and it's going to be a massive pain. But actually, like, chucking nearly 100 hours worth of game onto a single cartridge or a single disc is legitimately an excellent way to get people to play that series. And it does make me wonder. I mean, I do now think to myself, okay, well, are they going to do something more then? Because there is no new Ace Attorney game announced, and usually they do all of this sort of stuff to be like, hey, because we've got another one coming, right? That doesn't seem to be the case. Like, they don't seem to be doing anything with it at the moment, and it's just a really lovely bit of preservation of, like, these things now currently exist. They are, if you want to get really down to brass tacks with it, that Switch cartridge and that PS4 disc can also be used on a PS5 and a Switch 2, right?
Yeah.
Like, these are games that they've put them out and they can just live for another decade, and we don't end up with this weird mythologization of, like, oh, wouldn't it be amazing did you ever play Panzer Dragoon Saga back in the day? No. Oh, well, you can't play it anymore. And, if you want a copy of it now, it's £500 because they lost all the rights and they can't. No, it's just like, now it's just like, here you go. Here's the Ace Attorney games. They are not £150 on a cartridge. They are 30 quid for 3 of them.
I think it's probably important to note that whilst we're recording, half of our number, 50% of our cohort are multitasking.
I'm not really paying attention.
They're multitasking.
Yeah.
And I think we're going to need an update at the end of the show about how they're getting on. Pete and Sam, what are you doing currently as we're recording?
Well, because I mentioned earlier this year, we talked about having New Year's resolutions. And I said, foolishly, I'd like to get a load of models painted. Well, I haven't been. And
it is nearly the end of the year. It's March.
I'm very well aware that I'm going to run out of time. And I think the other thing for me is I've learned something about myself recently, which is, the kids today have fidget spinners.
Oh, God, you sound old.
Yeah.
But they have fidget spinners and stuff like that.
I mean, that was the kids of about 2-3 years ago, but
I was about to say.
Okay. Well, the kids of a day, one of the days, have fidget spinners and all those other sorts of things. Well, I'd never had anything along those lines, but I always found that I needed something to do with my hands. And I was able to, and that's why I love audiobook games, right? Because I can do something with my mind and I can do something with my hands. Right?
Yes.
So I have decided to do a little bit of painting and just see whether or not I can do this at the same time. And so far,
it's all right, isn't it?
It's been actually really nice because it's a thing you can do while also talking.
What are you both painting, out of curiosity?
So,
because it's off camera.
It is off camera. I am painting some of my Blood Bowl orcs.
Oh, lovely.
And I am slapping a load of paint in a bit of Foley for you.
Yeah. A roller was an odd choice.
Yeah. I am slapping a load. What I'm doing is a lot of block color stuff. So that means that I can actually focus on what it is that I'm saying and not oh God, I need to do the tiny little dotted I to make sure that no, it's just I'm putting silver onto large blocks of thing for a bit of trash, basically a bit of rubble. And so I'm just putting silver on trash.
I think putting silver on trash is a lovely strapline for what it is we do as a podcast.
Yeah.
I realise that obviously everyone listening to this will be on tenterhooks, wanting to find out what the other 2 games that I was going to discuss were.
Oh, for the blind date.
For the blind date. Obviously, last time
we didn't forget about that.
Okay, cool. Good. Because obviously last time we spoke about Capcom and we spoke about Wizard's Cup, and I teased you with 2 other titles. So let's talk about these 2 games. What do you want first? Do you want underwater engine building, or do you want Ancient Warfare?
Throw this over to Pete.
I want Warfare. Because I'm in a warfare mood.
So let me talk about Battalion, War of the Ancients.
Ooh.
And this comes from our good friends at Osprey Games.
Okay.
And also one of the co-designers of this game is someone who we've had a lot of affection for in the podcast before, Paolo Mori.
Oh, yes.
Oh, this is the person who made, I want to say it's called Blitzkrieg?
Yes, correct.
Yes.
Libertalia.
Correct. Libertalia.
And Ethnos, which is a game I've still not played.
Yes, and Ethnos. So a very renowned board game.
There's pedigree.
Created, definitely pedigree with inside Battalion. And it's drawn by Roland McDonald, which I won't lie, every time I sort of caught that out of my eye, I thought, is that Ronald? Oh, no, it's Roland. Who has previously done work for like Western Legends, the Undaunted series. Really excellent illustrator and graphic designer. So, Battalion: War of the Ancients it's a 2-player game. There is a 4-player version of it, but at its heart, at its core, you cut War of the Ancients open, and it is a 2-player game. I think that is really how it was always meant to be played.
Okay.
And I think what is in the box here with Battalion is one of the most generous boxes, providing a war experience that I think I've ever really come across. We've played lots of war games before, skirmish games before, and usually what you get in the box is you get very, very deep and genuine and strategic experiences. But in terms of how those experiences can flex and how dynamic they can be, I think sometimes those games can be quite lacking.
Mm-hmm.
However, with Battalion, a lot of effort has been put into really making it a very, very dynamic and exciting war game to play.
Okay.
So how the game plays is the first thing you have to do is you have to select who you're going to be. So the standard setup is you have 4 different armies. So you've got like Hannibal, Carthage, the Romans, and the Greeks all battling with each other. And the first game you're sort of asked to play is just one between the Romans and the Greeks. And from there you pick your units that you're going to play with, and you get these little like wooden rectangles that represent all the different units of your battle, and you line them all up against each other.
Yeah.
In these 3 different rows. You have your central row and then 2 side wings that you're playing. And the idea of the game is to basically either exhaust your player, so get them to basically draw all of their action cards, or be in a position where you can essentially attack down their central line and it's not defended. So thematically you are attacking, their camp is undefended, so you're able to just attack centrally down the line. Yep. But for me, the core of the game is this idea about exhaustion. Because throughout Battalion, what you're doing is really, and I think this is where you would really enjoy the game, Pete, is it's a game about resource management. 2 very, very key resources. One being the cards that you have, and the other one being the small control tokens.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Every time you want to do something with a unit, you have to put a control token down on them. Every time you need to get those control tokens back, you have to draw a card from your hand. Every time you are asked to remove a unit because it's been destroyed by your enemy, you have to take a card from your hand as a penalty. Mm-hmm. So what you're always trying to do is manage how many cards you've got on your hand and how many control tokens you've got out in the battlefield. Because if you put them all out in one go, that means you're going to have to recycle them back quite quickly. And if you leave yourself defenseless, that means you're going to have to basically draw a card from your hand as a punishment in order to let a unit go off to their death. Mm-hmm. So at all times, you are battling your opponent, but both you and your opponent have an equally difficult puzzle to wrap your head around in terms of how you are balancing the control that you've got on units and the hands and the cards that you've got in your hand. Because the cards that you've got in your hand are really powerful. They allow you to do things like refresh control, have another go immediately, move people around the battlefield and reorganize your forces. They can have a real swing on the battle. So you're always weighing up, like, I should just like draw a card because that might just give me a bit of an edge right here, or I can maybe discard a card and not play it, but that will allow me to move some of the people around the field and shore up my defenses where they need to be. And that is like the core bit of Battalion, and that's the bit I sort of really sort of latched onto.
It looks fantastic, and just hearing you talk about the fact that when you open the box, the first thing you do is choose a faction. It kind of reminds me of another Osprey game, Imperium.
Yes.
To a lesser extent, and the art style's gorgeous, a very clean aesthetic. When does the game end? Is it the case of first a certain number of points, or is it a certain number of rounds? So, are you kind of eking out as much as you can, maximizing each turn because there's only so many rounds or turns you have, or is it literally a race to get to a certain threshold?
The game ends when you cannot draw a card into your hand. You lose. You're exhausted. And the game ends if there is a clear path to your camp that is undefended and the player can attack through it. You lose. Your camp's been raided by the attackers. So when I'm talking about the whole resource management of it, being forced to draw a card into your hand at any point it feels like a real concession that you're making. And especially when you have to draw a new card to refresh the control tokens, which is the only thing that you can do to control the armies in front of you. Every time you do that, you feel like, was there some way that I could have done that a little bit better? Was there a way I could have eked out that turn just a little bit more in order to force my opponent to draw their card before I did? And I think that, when you said there, Kris, about what it's like to open the box, I think that is what struck me the most about Battalion. I think that as a game, if you like war games, if you like strategic face-to-face tugs of war 2-player games, and this theme appeals to you, then this is pretty much a superb game for you to get. I think you'll know whether you'll like this just from the title of the game, to be honest, because it's kind of like, whoa, that sounds exciting.
Yeah.
But what I think that Battalion does, which is very, very special, is the fact that, as I said at the beginning, how dynamic and flexible it is. You open up the box, there's 4 factions in there. Loads and loads of cardboard. When you just start out, you probably got 2 or 3 units on the board, and you're playing with 6 control markers. Those 6 control markers can go up to 12. And those factions on the board can go up to, I don't know, you can have pretty much a whole army in front of you between 2 sides. Like, the game asks you to really take it slowly in terms of how you're learning the game and how you're learning control, so you don't overstretch yourself so much. And then once you've done that, the game goes, right, you build the army. You decide how many control tokens that you want to do. You decide where you're going to place them all and how you build them.
Nice.
And
that's cool.
That, for me, was a real turning point in this game that goes like, wow, they've really understood what the appeal of these games are. And I've played so many games like this, these tug-of-war games where the setup is always the same and it's very, very predictable what you're going to be doing, and the gameplay's very samey, and some of that's really nice, like, a small scale versions, things like Compromat and things like that. You know what you're going to be getting, but with Battalion, every single time it could be so different.
But 20 to 45 minutes though, that's pretty good.
Yes. So you're playing with 6 control tokens. That makes the game about 20 minutes, and then you play with more control tokens. That's what adds the time into the game. So you can sit down. We would sit down and play like, right, got 20 minutes. Let's just play a little battle, set them up, all done. And it's like, right, we're going to make a bit of an event about this now. We're going to pick our armies and we're going to put them down, and we're going to play with some more control markers. So that, just so impressed by how dynamic this game ended up being. Very, very.
I like
good.
the idea of this, and as soon as you said the word ancients, I was like, aha, I'm on board. I think the thing that I struggle with is that a lot of people who are into ancients wargaming, for example, there is literally something called the Society of Ancients, which is a wargaming society that's been around since I think like the 60s or something like that in Britain, and it's about studying the warfare of the ancients, right? And they do it through war games. But the thing that a lot of people who talk about that stuff, and indeed, I'm actually off myself I'm going to a convention called Salute at some point soon, which is about miniatures war games and all that good stuff. A lot of the folks who do the ancient stuff that I kind of know of, I think they would see a 20 to 45 minute game and go, that's not for me, right? Because then or they would see a thing in which there isn't a specific representation of the ancients in a very specific, meticulous way.
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
Oh, well, 4 players, they would see a one-on-one battle as like, well, that's ludicrous. Like, that just didn't, I'm sure that, I don't think that ever happened, right? Like, so I guess the question is, like, this sounds really appealing to me. And to me specifically, I'm sat here like, yeah, I can totally play a game like that, right? I have my miniatures games that do ancient stuff, and that's that. And then there's a board game, there's a board game world in which, like, ancient stuff, like Civilization, for example, a 10-hour-long game. Where do you think the appeal actually lies here? You said, like, if this sounds like your cup of tea, but what if it doesn't sound like immediately the thing that you're like, oh yeah, man, that's my jam? Like, how would you recommend it to somebody who perhaps doesn't know what the difference between, the Macedonian Empire and the macadamia nut is, right? Like, how would you actually, like, put that? What would you say? Like, look, just because it's ancients, don't worry about that. The fun thing that you can go looking for is.
Yeah. Well, that is me. Like, that kind of thing. Like, I don't really like. For me, that is an abstract concept. It's like, there were, you will see characters depicted in units. Right, they got catapults. Right, they're my ranged people. They're going to do damage at range. Then you got the one on horses. Right, they're really quick and they're really good at melee, and they're going to get in there quickly and they're going to do a lot of damage. Right, that for me is sort of the abstract of what this game is, and that's kind of what I tuned into.
Yep.
In order to be sort of accepting of the theme, because that kind of thing doesn't really sort of sing to me in kind of a way. Like, I remember there was that meme years ago, and I was thinking about this when I was running the other day. There was that meme where it was just like partners asking their husbands or boyfriends how often they think about the Roman Empire, and they were going like, "Oh, every single day." I'm just like, I just don't. Is that true? Is that a thing? No. Because I just don't think about
what empire do you think about though, Sam?
Empire magazine subscription, and so for me, it was kind of like, right, what is in this game then? What is gonna sell this game to me? And it was all about using that control and that hand management. And I just found there's been not many games that I found that sort of level of exacting precision when it comes to exactly how are you using the tools that you've got available to you. And in a war setting, it kind of makes sense, because it kind of, right, you've got 2 control markers left. Are you going to carry on going down the middle, or are you going to sort of go down on this side and kind of take a bit of a risk that something might pay off, or are you going to double down on what you're already doing? And yeah, that feeling of having to take a card into your hand is always just felt good, because you got something that might even up the playing field, but also, right, we are edging closer here to doom. Like, we are heading closer here to the end of the game, because I just can't keep on drawing, and then making the person that you're playing against, making them draw a card. Like, yes, got you, you're drawing cards, You're using counters, I've got you. Like, that feedback of you are doing a good thing or bad things are happening to you is so instant in this game, but yet also quite ambiguous in a way, because again, people getting cards into their hands, these cards are powerful, that gives them an edge. It's a bad thing, but they've got an edge now over you. And that, I think for me, it was that was it. It was kind of, again, it's another game that's exploring a very, very singular and interesting board game mechanic and trying to really strip it down to its barest essentials and going, right, how good are you at resource management? how good are you at reading information that's in front of you and making an assessment of how you're going to distribute those resources that you've got. And for me, that was, that is the selling point.
What's behind door number 4, I suppose, Sam?
4, it's the last one. It's Pacifica. It's from Kosmos, and it's another one of Kosmos's ace 2-player games in the same vein as things like Targi and Lost Cities, and that one that you've got, Dan, with the turtle. So Kosmos have a big history of making really, really ace 2-player games, all come in same sort of form factor boxes. I think Pacifica is the one I've been the most excited about probably since Targi.
So I'm curious about this, Sam, because at time of recording, that in terms of the board gaming channels I'm plugged into, no one has yet spoken about this game. So I know nothing about this apart from the beautiful art that I'm seeing here and the fact that it's another kind of classic kind of card game from Kosmos.
Yes, beautiful art. It looks amazing. So how it works is a bit like other sort of tug-of-war-y kind of games that we've spoken about recently, like Katmai and Compromat. The aim of the game is you've got 7 different cards across the centre of the table, different stacks, different decks of cards. Each stack represents a different quality of this underwater city of Pacifica. So some of it's the people who work there, some of it's the shops where they buy stuff is, some of it's the resources that they use to power the underwater city, some of it's money, some of it's the industry that's used to make some of the tools and the goods and things. And what you're doing is competing over presence over those 7 sort of parts of Pacifica, and whoever has the most presence on each side of it gets basically gets sort of this little sort of dials, this little lovely little round dial that twists and represents each of the 7 different domains. If you ever have 5 of those dials, then you win the game. Or if you ever have 3 that have twisted to their maximums, you also win the game. So it's basically a tug of war, like area control style game. But for me, what was really sort of the most fun about it was this idea of kind of like building towards something and building a real presence on the board. Because what happens is that each card that you play to each domain will have a token on it, like a picture, which refers to another area, another domain. So, for example, for you to get a certain tool, then you will need people in order to make that tool. So the first thing that you've got to do is to get people, but to get people, you've got to build houses, right? So that means I need to put a card down first that will give me houses, and then now I've got the houses. That means I can now activate the people, and now I've got the people inside the houses. That means I can get that tool. And I think for me, that level of building a machine and almost like a tech tree,
yes,
style of gameplay made it this really snappy, really engaging tug of war that you immediately know, right, I know what the other player on the other side of the table is going for. I know what they're doing. I can see it. I can read it. It makes perfect sense. They need that to get to that, to get to that. That's what they're doing. I'm doing this to get to that, to get that, to get to this. And we were gripped. We played about 3 or 4 games back to back because they were really speedy, like within 15, 20 minutes. And the idea behind the game and the central mechanics are that on your turn, you either play a card, you either activate a card, or you draw a card. And because that feedback from the game, because that knowledge that you build up of, right, if I'm going to need this, then I'm going to need that first. Those decisions of where you draw cards from and drawing from specific decks across those 7 regions becomes really, really interesting. And suddenly that knowledge that you have of what your opponent is doing and what you are trying to do becomes really key to success. I think it's really good. And I'm really surprised that more places aren't sort of talking about it, because I think the mixture of the art, how simple it communicates its theme and its ideas, Kris, is really up your street.
Yeah, it looks really, really lovely. The art style, I don't know why. I'm looking at it. I'm getting echoes of Jaipur, completely different type of game, but something short and snappy, 2-player game, which feels quite luxurious on the table. Right up my street. I think maybe one of the reasons why perhaps it's not been spoken about, I think it's maybe is that it originated, I think, was it in Germany first, and then it's moved over here. So I think it's only just as an English language publication made its way over here. Whereas I think there are plenty of channels speaking about it that I think don't happen to be English speaking, say, for example.
Yeah. But for me, it just joins a pantheon of 2-player games in Kosmos that you just can't go wrong with, really. And if you're looking for 2-player games, it's a great place to start. This, Targi, Lost Cities, Imhotep the Duel, Lord of the Rings Confrontation,
which is having a new reprint.
Yeah, I think Pacifica for me is up there. I really, really enjoyed it.
Okay, now Dan, I know that Sam tried to bury this in the last episode, but it has been your birthday.
Oh yes. That reminds me, we need to talk about mine.
Yes, of course, Sam. But I know that part of your little celebrations for your birthday were that you took yourself off to the cinema.
I did. I treated myself to a little trip to the cinema, and I thought, what's new and exciting at the cinema? And I found Captain America. Brave New World. So it was actually just last night I managed to nip off, leave the kids at home with my wife, not just by themselves. And yeah, had a little trip to cinema to see the where are Marvel going next. They've had a bit of a rocky road, let's say, since Endgame, which is, let's face it, quite a long time ago now. And every time a new film comes out, it does seem to be, okay, is this where kind of we get back on the road to the new Endgame, or to the Doomsday, so to speak? And so the next kind of car off the rank is Captain America: Brave New World, which I was hopeful for. When the trailers first started coming out, I wasn't a bit that interested. However, kind of some of the later trailers really started to get me interested. And I think similar to the new trailers for Thunderbolts, I feel like they've hired just some really good people to do some really good trailers, because they really are nailing it at the moment.
Yeah.
So Captain America: Brave New World is the 4th Captain America film. This one kind of continues off the back of Endgame, where Steve Rogers hands over the shield to Sam Wilson, formerly Falcon. That story also got picked up in Falcon and the Winter Soldier, the Disney Plus series, where he kind of took on the mantle of Captain America over that course of that series. That series wasn't the best; it was a little bit boring, but it kind of greased the wheels to get us to the point where, okay, Sam Wilson is Captain America, brilliant, let's move on. And this kind of picks up. It's been a while, but this kind of picks up. But it's not really a sequel to your Captain America, or it's not a sequel to Endgame. It's not really even a sequel to Falcon and the Winter Soldier. Really, it's a sequel to possibly the least watched Marvel film ever, The Incredible Hulk, because that's where it feeds back to. Because it kind of feels like a bit like a two-hander of Anthony Mackie, who I really like. I think he's really good in the role.
Oh, very
I
much so.
really like him as Sam Wilson. He's really charismatic. He's a really watchable presence on screen. Completely buy him in that role. So it's him, and then it's the character of Thaddeus Thunderbolt Ross, who in the original Incredible Hulk and kind of throughout the MCU series has been played by William Hurt. William Hurt sadly died in 2022. So for this film, that role is taken on by Harrison Ford, and it's kind of a balancing act between those two characters. Really, they both kind of get it's not so much equal billing because it is a Captain America film, but it's all about both of them. Having watched the trailers are very clear as to what's going to happen, and Thaddeus Thunderbolt Ross is going to become Red Hulk. It's up there on the posters. It's up there in the trailer. That there's no hiding.
Really unfortunate.
I know, Chris. I'm really interested because I know you didn't watch many of the trailers, and so quite early on, they said, "Yeah, we're doing Red Hulk."
Yeah, I think I'd seen the teaser. I typically just watch the teasers. I don't watch some of the later trailers, and I'm quite glad I didn't because I don't want to bury the lead here too much, but as Sam and I were talking about this afterwards because we've seen it. I think I would be more disappointed if I'd seen the trailers going into it.
I kind of to cut to the chase of it before I kind of go a bit deeper. I walked out the cinema thinking, you know what, that was all right. That was okay.
You heard it here first, folks.
That was a typical post-Endgame Marvel film.
Great.
Really. I kind of think about it, the kind of Marvel films up to Endgame have routinely, most of the time, been a solid 4 out of 5 film. There are a couple that stretch up to 5 out of 5. There are a couple that dip to, say, 3 out of 5. But pretty much that's where your sweet spot is. Since Endgame, kind of most of them are sitting around the 2 to 3 out of 5 mark.
Oh,
a couple of
no.
them have stretched. And I think only Spider-Man has really stretched up to 5. We're not going to get into Eternals. I'll touch on it briefly because it is in... They finally make a reference to it in this film.
At long last.
God.
So the overarching narrative of this is based around Eternals and the emergence of a Celestial in Eternals has become referred to as Celestial Island, and we find out very early on that Celestial Island is made from, drumroll, adamantium.
Oh,
Hurrah!
for God's sake.
It's the introduction of adamantium into the MCU.
Okay.
Obviously, adamantium is Wolverine. I don't know why they couldn't just make that more vibranium that's already established in this world. They basically said it's the same thing, but more. So other than saying, "Oh look, we're gonna give it to Wolverine. He's gonna have claws," I don't really know the purpose of that, but they've used it as a political device to continue that theme from the Captain America films of it's not being your usual Marvel films. It's about this political intrigue and conspiracy thrillers and all that kind of thing. And that's much more serious and more grounded. And that's great. That's brilliant. And I actually don't mind them kind of using Eternals and the Celestial to further that narrative.
Oh, no,
that
it's great.
Does make sense. It's silly to have a giant man climbing out of the ocean.
It is all silly, though, let's be honest.
It is all silly. But that's the nature behind it. And so the problems I actually eventually had with it was, as we talked about, it keeps nodding back to the Incredible Hulk. The Incredible Hulk came out a long time ago.
Yeah.
And it hasn't been talked about at all. It's been completely forgotten about. Even with Mark Ruffalo coming in, it's a you've had some maybe vaguely passing references. The love of the character Bruce Banner's life has not been mentioned since the Incredible Hulk film.
Yeah.
So to have this film coming out all these years later and leaning quite heavily on that, I know obviously William Hurt has appeared many times, and it may feel completely different if William Hurt was in this role. You kind of feel like it's just his version of the character in Incredible Hulk has just been picked up again because there's no real development beyond where he was all those years ago. But the biggest problem for me, and it's because of the trailers, it's because of the poster, I spent the entire of that film thinking, when's he going to turn into Red Hulk? When's he
Yeah.
going to turn it? Because I knew
Yeah.
it was coming. We all knew it was coming. They put it front and center. I've not searched this out, and they kind of play it as if they're not explaining what's happening. He just keeps getting slightly more angry and not explaining it, and you're kind of like, well, I know what's going to happen. So why are you spinning your wheels here? I don't get me wrong, I don't need Red Hulk to appear at the start, but don't start showing me having some anger issues in the first 20 minutes.
But also, like, not to muck around, but like, I like comic books, right? I like comic books. I like Marvel, and like, I don't care about who Red Hulk is. The only time I've ever seen Red Hulk is in Marvel vs. Capcom 2. Like,
Yeah.
I genuinely don't know why I should be interested in this.
I think this is the kind of frustration, really, which picks on the point Dan was making, was the fact that actually, if they'd kept that back, it would have actually revealed the fact that there's actually a really interesting plot here. There's a lovely kind of symmetry. It's actually really a story about revenge, like almost like a kind of potentially a very Monte Cristo-esque revenge that you're kind of seeing here, that makes you very kind of conflicted about about General Thunderbolt Ross and what happens to him, but also as well, it reveals this difficult relationship that Captain America has, who doesn't agree with the politics necessarily of the president, but is serving the president because he is Captain America, and that conflict is there, but that is completely bulldozed completely by the possibility of this action set piece at some point. And what I wanted from this was something like the Manchurian Candidate, which is what I think they wanted originally. They got spooked. They did a ton of reshoots. The Sidewinder character, played by the fantastic Giancarlo Esposito, who
Totally wasted.
Who has been holding off joining the Marvel Universe except for it was a film, chose to do this, and admittedly had some good scenes, but clearly it felt just kind of tacked on to just kind of introduce additional bits of action into it. Whereas actually what I wanted was a kind of something of the enemy of the state, where you've again got a Captain America who's on the run, kind of conflicted, and has to kind of make this choice between their own values and serving America as this emblem of that. But instead they were kind of rehashing bits of the kind of storyline of Falcon and the Winter Soldier, because they were aware of the fact that perhaps some people didn't see that series. So the same crisis of conscience he has in the series appears here, a little bit like Wanda Maximoff in Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness. So it kind of feels a bit of a mess of a film, really. And it's a shame, because there's actually a really interesting plot there that's just not had the right things kind of emphasized, really.
And there's some really interesting elements that they touch on, but don't really explore fully. Like as a big point of like, this is a guy who doesn't have the super serum. He's not a super soldier like Cap, like Steve Rogers did, like Winter Soldier did, or kind of various people who have that. He's just a guy. He kind of, there is a narrative point that he has turned down the serum. He's had the option, and what does that mean? Actually, that makes him an inspiration. That's really interesting stuff.
Yep.
Let's be positive. This is a show where we talk about the things we like. So I think Anthony Mackie does a fantastic job, as you said before, Dan and Sam. I think he is the best thing in this film. I really like the guy. I find him so incredibly watchable. I think there's a really interesting plot here, stepping back from it and recounting the plot to myself in terms of that kind of symmetry I spoke about before, this kind of tragic revenge story that is running in the background of this. I think, I think it's not a triumphant return or a triumphant start to the year, but I would put it at the level of, say, Iron Man 2, which, if you think about Iron Man 2, that is a mess of a film to a degree. But it is led by a very likeable person that you just want to see them more and more perform, really. But that equally also is just a series of set pieces running through it. Where you've equally got like a tug of war in terms of not knowing who to give screen presence to. Mickey Rourke has come in. He's just won an Oscar for The Wrestler. He's an Oscar-winning actor, Mickey Rourke, coming in. These two together, how do we pitch this? Harrison Ford has joined the MCU. Oh my gosh, well, we can't play down their role, like we've done with a bit like Giancarlo Esposito. So it's just a bit unfortunate, really, in terms of just where they've chosen to emphasize certain bits and lessen others.
It does kind of feel a bit like they've been spooked by the poor reception. Like, if you think back to Winter Soldier, like that was not a typical Marvel film. That was like you mentioned like this wanting to be like Manchurian Candidate. That's a similar kind of thing. That's conspiracy. That's the Cold War. That's all that stuff happening. And that's a really fascinating film. And that's one of the reasons why it's one of the most popular. And as you say, all the elements were there to be able to do this or something similar within that vein here. But as you say, I imagine that probably was where they wanted to go and kind of got spooked and said, actually, no, we need to throw a few more massive battles into this, and we maybe just throw all of it at Red Hulk and all that stuff. What could have been really fascinating and interesting ended up being, as you say, Iron Man 2, kind of generic for the Marvel kind of formula.
Right.
So can I just get an update, Pete and Sam? How are you getting on with your painting?
Thanks.
I've done a base count of green, and I'm just doing the little red bits now.
Yeah, that's lovely.
Little base,
don't get too
little
technical.
base of Mephiston red.
I've
Do you have silver trash, Pete?
I've done a motorcycle. I've put on some what are called some ink washes, or as I like to call it, liquid talent, which is basically a very, very thin ink that you put it over a thing, and then it just looks like you're really good at painting.
My kind of paint.
Which is it honestly.
Yeah, it's
Dan,
great. Oh, Dan, yeah.
When I showed it to Sam, I was like, Sam, these are good, but you need to get yourself some Agrax Earthshade or some Nuln Oil on this stuff. And Sam was like, I don't know. As soon as it goes on, it's just like, oh, yep, no, I'm a convert. Yep, this is it. This is this.
Who knew I could paint?
So
Yeah.
I think it's only fair for the listener, because obviously they can't see the artistry on display here. If you could just at the end of this recording take a snap of the works in progress.
Oh yeah, of course.
Yeah.
We'll do
And
that.
we can put those on the gram at Staying In Pod is our handle for Instagram.
Yes.
Dan, if anyone wants to get in touch with us via the traditional electronic mail, what is the way in which they can do that?
They can do that through stayinginpod@gmail.com.
Lovely. And it's fair to say that both Pacifica and Battalion will be on our BGG page, which Pete very kindly puts together. Will Apollo Justice be on the Steam curation page?
Yes,
Pete?
yeah, it's available on Steam as well. You can get it on there. Yeah, we'll definitely put that up on there. And obviously we talk a lot about video games. If there's anything that we've talked about in the past, or you're a new listener and you're like, I wonder what nonsense they've talked about before, you can go onto our Steam curator page and you can see all the games we've ever talked about with links to the podcast episode that we discussed them on the review themselves.
To be fair, there is actually quite often I'll like find a game I buy a game or something like that, and I think have we talked about this on the pod? And I will actually go on there and say, oh yeah, we talked like episode 73. Oh brilliant! I'll go in and I can listen to what we actually talked about on there.
Yeah.
We will have just be, as you're listening to this, in Harrogate, having a wonderful time.
We might be stood behind you.
Hello. If you'd like to see what we were playing, what we were doing in Harrogate, again at Staying In Pod, is on Instagram. We put up usually what I do is I really annoy Kris by staying up late at night on my phone. And he's like, come to bed. And I'm like, no, I'm making a post for Instagram. You know what it's like.
You're painting an interesting picture here.
Yeah.
Well, we save money by having a shared bedroom.
Yeah. Go to bed. Not come to bed.
Sorry.
Come to bed.
Sorry. Yeah.
Just to be clear.
Yeah.
One word changes the tone massively.
It's getting cold.
Yeah, so if you want to see what we've been up to whilst we are in aircon, then check out the Instagram now. One of those pictures will be of all of our 4 lovely faces trying to save the world playing the magnificent Daybreak. So, yes, check it out.
And
that, go.
Oh, I'm just saying, pants optional.
Pants?
Optional?
As usual.